My name is Eli Barnes, and I used to think I was lucky. Married to the most beautiful woman in Millbrook, Maine, owner of a decent IT consulting business, living in the house my grandfather built. That was before I discovered what my wife Sienna really thought of me. I'd come home early from a job in Portland because the client's server room had flooded. Typical Tuesday in coastal Maine. Everything goes wrong when the weather turns nasty. I pulled into our driveway at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, expecting to find Sienna at her marketing firm downtown. Instead, her silver BMW sat in the garage next to a black Mercedes I didn't recognize. The front door was unlocked, which was strange. Sienna was paranoid about security, always lecturing me about alarm systems. I stepped inside, shaking rain from my jacket, and heard voices upstairs. Laughter. The kind of intimate, breathless laughter that made my stomach clench. "See," I called out. The laughter stopped abruptly. Footsteps scrambled across the hardwood floor above. A door slammed. "Just a minute, honey." Sienna's voice carried down the stairs, artificially bright. "I'm in a video conference." I stood in our foyer, water dripping from my clothes onto the antique rug Sienna had insisted we buy, and felt something fundamental shift in my chest. In 8 years of marriage, Sienna had never called me honey. She said it was too common, too beneath her carefully cultivated image. I climbed the stairs slowly, my work boots heavy on each step. The master bedroom door was closed, but I could hear hushed whispers inside. I pressed my ear against the wood. "You need to leave now." Sienna's voice was sharp with panic. "Relax, babe. He's probably just grabbing something and heading back out." A man's voice, smooth and confident, familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. "You don't understand. Eli's not stupid. If he figures this out, what's he going to do?" Guy's a computer nerd who fixes printers for a living. I own half this town. My hand froze on the doorknob. That voice belonged to Chad Forrester, Sienna's boss at Coastal Marketing Solutions. The same Chad Forrester who'd been to our house for dinner parties, who'd shaken my hand and complimented my barbecue skills, who'd looked me in the eye and called me buddy, while apparently screwing my wife behind my back. I backed away from the door and walked to the guest bathroom at the end of the hall, turned on the faucet, let the water run loud enough to cover my movements. Then I crept back and listened. "He's in the bathroom," Sienna whispered. "You can slip out the back stairs." "This is ridiculous. When are you going to tell him?" "Tell him what? That you're leaving him? That we're going public with this?" Sienna laughed, but it wasn't the warm sound I'd fallen in love with in college. This laugh was cold, calculating. "Chad, sweetie, you're married too, and I'm not going anywhere until I figure out how to get what I want out of this divorce. Eli might look harmless, but he's got assets tied up in that business of his. Plus, this house is worth almost $500,000 now. So, what am I? Just entertainment until you cash out? You're my boss who's been very helpful with my career advancement. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be." I heard movement, the rustle of clothing, the soft sound of a kiss. My wife was kissing another man in the bedroom we'd shared for 8 years. In the bed where we'd made love on our wedding night, where she'd cried in my arms when her father died, where I'd brought her breakfast every Sunday morning since we'd moved. In together, the back stairs creaked. Chad was leaving through the kitchen, just like Sienna had suggested. I waited until I heard his car start, then flushed the toilet and walked back to our bedroom. Sienna was sitting at her vanity, touching up her lipstick. She'd changed clothes. The blue dress she'd worn to work that morning was gone, replaced by yoga pants and a sweater. Her hair was perfectly arranged, not a strand out of place. "Hi, baby," she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "You're home early." Job got canceled, flooding. I kept my voice neutral, casual. "How was your day?" "Oh, you know, same old boring meetings. I came home around lunch with a headache. Thought I'd work from here this afternoon." She turned to face me, and I saw the performance in her smile, the careful arrangement of her features into the expression of a loving wife. "How long have you been home?" "Just walked in. Heard you on a call upstairs. Conference call with a client in Boston. Very tedious." She stood and crossed to me, rising on her toes to kiss my cheek. I smelled Chad's cologne on her skin, mixed with her expensive perfume. "I'm starving. Want to grab dinner at Murphy's?" Murphy's Seafood was the town's gossip central, where everyone went to see and be seen. The last place I wanted to be right now. Actually, I'm pretty tired. Rain always gives me a headache. Maybe we could just order pizza. Sienna's smile flickered for just a moment. "Of course, whatever you want." But I caught the flash of annoyance in her eyes, the slight tightening around her mouth. Sienna hated pizza, said it was greasy and common. She'd wanted to go to Murphy's for a reason. That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe beside me, staring at the ceiling and replaying every conversation, every late night at the office, every business trip and weekend conference that had taken her away from home. How long had this been going on? How many times had Chad Forrester been in my house, in my bed, laughing about the stupid husband who fixed computers and didn't know what was happening under his own roof? I thought about confronting her directly, demanding the truth. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way she'd talked about my assets, about cashing out of our marriage like it was a business transaction. Maybe it was the casual cruelty in her voice when she'd dismissed me as harmless. Or maybe it was the memory of my grandfather who'd built this house with his own hands and taught me that sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to understand it completely before you act. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to confront Sienna. Not yet. I was going to learn exactly what I was dealing with first. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Sienna went to work, came home at normal hours, made conversation about her day. I nodded and smiled and played the part of the oblivious husband, while my mind raced with questions and my gut churned with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I'd always been good with technology. It's how I made my living. But I'd never used those skills to spy on my own wife. The thought made me sick. But not as sick as the memory of her voice discussing my assets like line items in a budget. On Thursday morning, after Sienna left for work, I sat in my home office and stared at her laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, plugged in and charging. She always forgot to take it with her when she was distracted, and lately she'd been very distracted indeed. I knew her passwords. We'd never hidden that kind of thing from each other back when I thought we had a marriage built on trust and honesty. The irony wasn't lost on me as I opened her email and began scrolling through her messages. Most of it was routine work correspondence, client communications, meeting schedules. But buried in her personal folder, I found what I was looking for. Months of messages between Sienna and Chad, starting professional and gradually becoming more intimate. The early emails were about marketing campaigns and budget meetings. Then came the compliments about her ideas, her appearance, her intelligence. Chad was smooth. I had to give him that. He'd played the mentor role perfectly, building her up and making her feel special. By summer, the messages had turned explicitly intimate. I sat in my chair, my coffee growing cold, reading detailed descriptions of what my wife and her boss had done in his office after hours, in hotel rooms during business trips, and, yes, in my house when I was away on jobs. But it was the most recent email thread that made my hands shake with anger from chad.forrester.coastalmarketing.com to sienna.barnes@coastalmarketing.com. Subject: Next Steps. Sienna, we need to talk about where this is going. I know you're worried about the divorce, but my lawyer says it's pretty straightforward. Maine is a no-fault state, and if Eli doesn't contest it, you could be out in 6 months. The house situation is trickier. Since it was his grandfather's, there might be some family trust issues, But if you can get him to agree to sell and split the proceeds, you'd walk away with a nice nest egg. Plus, whatever you can get from his business assets. I've been thinking we should go public with our relationship soon. My wife already suspects something, and it would be easier to control the narrative if we get ahead of it. Let me know what you think. We could discuss it over dinner at my lake house this weekend. I'll make sure we have plenty of time to talk. C. From sienna.barnes@coastalmarketing.com. 2. chad.forrester.coastalmarketing.com. Subject: Next steps. Chad, I appreciate your eagerness, but we need to be smart about this. Eli might seem harmless, but he's more observant than people give him credit for. If he gets suspicious before I'm ready to move, he could make things difficult. I need to understand exactly what I'm entitled to before I file anything. The house is worth at least $450,000 now, and his business brings in around $200,000 a year. If I can show that I supported his career by handling the household and entertaining his clients, I might be able to claim a bigger share. Also, I need to make sure he doesn't have any hidden assets. He's always been secretive about his finances. Let's wait a few more weeks. I want to have all my ducks in a row before we make any big moves. S.P.S. Your lake house sounds perfect for this weekend. I'll tell Eli I'm going to a spa retreat with the girls. I printed out the entire email chain, my hands shaking as the pages emerged from my printer. Secretive about finances. I'd shared every bank statement, every business expense, every investment with her. The only thing I'd kept separate was my grandfather's trust fund, and that was because the terms of the trust required it to remain in my name only. But now I understood why she'd been asking so many questions about it lately. Casual inquiries about how much it was worth, whether it could be liquidated, whether there were any restrictions on how the money could be used. She wasn't planning to leave me for love. She was planning to strip mine our marriage for everything she could get, then move on to Chad Forrester like I was just another business transaction that had run its course. I sat back in my chair and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, where my heart used to be. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about betrayal on a level I'd never imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text from my oldest friend, Tommy Sawyer. Tommy and I had grown up together, played football together in high school, been each other's best man. He managed the marina downtown now, and we usually grabbed beers on Friday nights. "Murphy's tonight. Haven't seen you in weeks. Sienna keeping you on a short leash?" I stared at the message and realized I hadn't seen Tommy in almost a month. Every time he'd invited me out, Sienna had found a reason why I couldn't go. A dinner party she'd forgotten to mention, a work event that required spousal attendance, a headache that meant she needed me home to take care of her. How many friendships had she systematically undermined? How many connections had she severed to keep me isolated and dependent on her? I texted back. "Murphy's sounds perfect. 7:00 p.m. You got it, brother. Fair warning, though. There's been some interesting gossip floating around town about certain marketing executives and their extracurricular activities. Might want to brace yourself." My stomach dropped. If Tommy had heard rumors, that meant other people knew, which meant Sienna and Chad hadn't been as discreet as they thought. I spent the rest of the day thinking about what Tommy had said. By the time evening came, I'd made another decision. I wasn't going to hide from the gossip or pretend I didn't know what was happening. It was time to start gathering intelligence from sources beyond my wife's email account. Murphy's Seafood sat on the harbor, a weathered building that had been serving lobster rolls and local gossip for 60 years. The interior was all dark wood and nautical decorations, with a long bar that attracted everyone from fishermen to lawyers to tourists looking for authentic Maine atmosphere. Tommy was already there when I arrived, his broad frame hunched over a beer at our usual table near the window. He'd put on weight since his days as a cop, but he still had the sharp eyes and easy smile that had made him popular with everyone in town. Eli. He stood and clapped me on the back. "Good to see you, man. You look like hell." "Thanks. You always were a charmer." "I'm serious. You okay? You've been MIA lately. I ordered a beer from Marty, the bartender who'd been working at Murphy's since before we were born. Marty had a memory like a steel trap and a network of information that would make the CIA jealous. Just been busy with work, I said. You know how it is. Tommy studied my face. Yeah, I know how it is. Question is, do you know how it is? Before I could ask what he meant, Marty appeared with my beer and a knowing look. Evening, Eli. Haven't seen you around much lately. Of course, your wife's been making the rounds plenty. My grip tightened on the beer bottle. What do you mean? Marty glanced around, then leaned closer. Look, I don't like to spread tales, but you're a good guy, and you deserve to know. That wife of yours has been coming in here regular, like always with that fancy boss of hers. Real cozy, if you know what I mean. How cozy? Let's just say they ain't discussing quarterly reports over dinner. Tommy was watching my face carefully. You knew, didn't you? I took a long drink of beer, buying time to think. I suspected. How long? I found out for sure a few days ago. Came home early, heard them upstairs. Tommy's expression darkened. Jesus, Eli, in your house? In our bedroom? The words tasted bitter. Marty whistled low. That's cold, even for her. Even for her. I looked between them. What's that supposed to mean? Tommy and Marty exchanged glances. Eli, Tommy said carefully, Sienna's got a reputation around town, has for a while now. What kind of reputation? The kind where people think she married you for your money in your grandfather's house, then decided she could do better. The words hit me like a physical blow. People have been talking about this. Not maliciously, Marty said quickly. Folks like you, but your wife? She's got a way of looking down on people, making them feel small. And when someone like that starts stepping out on their spouse, well, people notice. I thought about all the times Sienna had criticized my friends, my clothes, my interests, how she'd gradually isolated me from the people I cared about, making me think it was my choice to stay home instead of going out. How long has this been going on? I asked. The affair. Maybe 6 months that we know of, Tommy said, but the attitude that's been building for years. I finished my beer in silence, processing this information. My marriage hadn't just died in the last few months. It had been dying slowly, poisoned by Sienna's contempt and my own willingness to ignore the signs. So, what are you going to do? Tommy asked. I looked out the window at the harbor, where boats bobbed in the evening light. My grandfather had taught me to sail in these waters, had shown me how to read the weather and navigate by the stars. He'd also taught me that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. I'm going to handle it, I said finally. Handle it? How? I turned back to my oldest friend and smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a nice smile. I'm going to give my wife exactly what she deserves. That weekend, while Sienna was at Chad's lake house pretending to be at a spa retreat, I sat in my home office and planned her destruction. It sounds dramatic when I put it that way, but that's exactly what it was. She'd been planning mine for months, after all. The only difference was that she wanted to destroy me for money, while I wanted to destroy her for justice. I started with research. Maine's divorce laws, asset protection strategies, business valuation methods. I also looked into Chad Forres's background, his business dealings, his marriage to a prominent local family. Knowledge was power, and I intended to arm myself with both. Chad's wife, Patricia, came from old money. Her family owned 3 seafood processing plants and a significant chunk of waterfront property. She was also known for her charitable work and her zero tolerance for scandal. If she found out about Chad's affair, it wouldn't just end his marriage, it would end his social standing and probably his business relationships. Sienna, meanwhile, had built her reputation on being the perfect corporate wife and rising marketing executive. She served on charity boards, organized fundraisers, and cultivated an image of success and sophistication. She'd worked hard to distance herself from her working-class roots, and that carefully constructed persona was her most valuable asset. It was also her greatest vulnerability. I spent Sunday afternoon visiting my neighbor, Mrs. Glay, a 70-year-old widow who knew everything that happened in our neighborhood. She'd been friends with my grandmother and had always treated me like family. "Eli, dear." She welcomed me into her kitchen with genuine warmth. "I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" "Holding up?" She gave me a sharp look. "Don't play dumb with me, young man. I've got eyes, and I've seen that fancy car in your driveway when you're not home. Same car that belongs to that man who was at your Christmas party last year." Mrs. Glee had always been observant, but this was impressive even for her. "How long have you known?" "Since spring. I was working in my garden when I saw him leave through your back gate. Thought it was odd him sneaking around like that." She poured me coffee without asking. "Your grandmother would have skinned that girl alive for disrespecting her house like that. What would my grandfather have done?" Mrs. Glee smiled grimly. "Your grandfather was a patient man, but he didn't believe in letting people walk all over him. He'd have made sure everyone in town knew exactly what kind of woman she really was." "That's what I'm thinking too." "Good. That girl's been putting on airs since the day she moved in, acting like she's better than the rest of us. Time someone knocked her down a peg." Mrs. Glay had connections throughout the town's social network. Garden club, church committee, historical society. If I needed information spread quickly and thoroughly, she was better than social media. "I might need some help," I said carefully. "What kind of help?" "The kind where certain information finds its way to the right people at the right time." Her eyes lit up with interest. "I'm listening." Monday morning, I put the first phase of my plan into action. While Sienna was at work, I installed monitoring software on our home network. Nothing illegal. It was my network, after all. But it would let me track all the devices that connected to it and monitor internet activity. I also set up a few strategically placed cameras around the house. Again, perfectly legal since it was my property, and I made sure they were only in common areas. I wasn't interested in creating revenge porn. I just wanted evidence of when Chad was in my house and for how long. The cameras were tiny, virtually invisible, and connected to cloud storage that Sienna couldn't access. Within a few days, I had clear footage of Chad arriving Tuesday afternoon and not leaving until almost 6 p.m. They spent most of the time upstairs, but I also got audio of them in the kitchen discussing their plans. "I can't wait much longer," Chad was saying. "Patricia is getting suspicious, and I need to make a move before she starts digging into my finances." "Just give me another month," Sienna replied. "I want to document everything Eli owns before I file. Once I have a complete asset list, I can move fast." "What about his business? That's where the real money is." "I'm working on it." I've been asking questions, trying to understand how it's structured. If I can show that I contributed to its success, I might be able to claim a significant share. I almost laughed out loud. Sienna had never shown the slightest interest in my business. She couldn't even explain what I did for a living beyond something with computers. But the conversation gave me valuable information. They were planning to move within a month, and they were both motivated by financial pressure. Patricia Forrester was getting suspicious, which meant Chad was vulnerable. And Sienna was still gathering intelligence, which meant she didn't have a complete picture of my assets yet. That was about to become very important. Wednesday evening, I had dinner with Tommy at a restaurant in the next town over, somewhere we wouldn't be overheard by local gossips. "I need to ask you something," I said after we'd ordered, "and I need you to be completely honest." "Shoot, how many people in town actually like Sienna?" Tommy considered this carefully. "Like her or tolerate her because she's your wife?" "Either. Honestly, not many. She's got a way of making people feel stupid or poor, or both. The wives especially can't stand her. What about her friends at work? You mean Lexi and April? They're not really friends, more like accessories. Sienna keeps them around because they make her look good, and they don't threaten her position. This was better than I'd hoped. If Sienna had real friends, people who genuinely cared about her, my plan would be cruel and unjustified. But if she'd isolated herself through her own arrogance and manipulation, then she'd created her own vulnerability. "Why are you asking?" Tommy said. "Because I'm going to destroy her reputation, her career, and her social standing. And I want to make sure I'm not hurting innocent people in the process." Tommy stared at me. "Jesus, Eli, what are you planning?" "Nothing illegal, nothing violent, but I'm going to make sure that everyone in town knows exactly who Sienna Barnes really is." "And then what?" "Then I'm going to divorce her and make sure she gets exactly what she's entitled to under Maine law, which, thanks to the prenup she insisted on, is basically nothing." Tommy's eyes widened. "There's a prenup?" I smiled. Sienna insisted on it before we got married, said it was romantic, that it proved we were marrying for love, not money. She was so confident that she'd never need it, because she'd never want to leave me. What does it say? That in the event of divorce due to adultery, the cheating spouse forfeits any claim to property acquired before or during the marriage? Sienna was making $30,000 a year when we signed it. She thought she was protecting herself from me. Holy. The house stays with me because it's family property held in trust. The business stays with me because she has no involvement in it. Her car is leased through her company. About the only thing she owns outright is her jewelry and her clothes. Tommy started laughing. "She's been planning to take you for everything you're worth. And she's actually going to walk away with nothing. Less than nothing. She'll have no job, no reputation, no friends, and no money. Just like she deserves." "When do we start?" I looked at my oldest friend and felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in months. You think I'm going to miss this? After what she's done to you? After the way she's treated everyone in this town?" Tommy grinned. "Brother, I wouldn't miss this for the world." That night, I finalized my plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scope. I would systematically destroy every aspect of the life Sienna had built, using her own actions and words against her. And I would make sure that everyone who mattered was watching when it all came crashing down. The best part? She would never see it coming until it was far too late to stop. The following Friday, I made my first move. Sienna had mentioned that she and her work friends were having drinks at Murphy's after their weekly team meeting. It was the perfect opportunity to begin planting seeds. I arrived early and positioned myself at the bar where I could observe without being obvious about it. Marty, who is now fully briefed on my situation, made sure I had a clear view of the restaurant while appearing to be just another customer watching the game on TV. Sienna arrived at 6:30 with Lexi Chen and April Morrison from her office. Lexi was Sienna's closest work friend, an ambitious account manager who worshipped Sienna's success. April worked in HR and had always seemed uncomfortable around Sienna, though she'd never said why. They took a table near the window, and I could hear most of their conversation thanks to the small recording device Tommy had helped me place earlier. It was risky, but I needed to understand the dynamics between them. "So," Lexi was saying as they settled in with their wine, "what's the latest with your mystery, man? You've been glowing lately." Sienna glanced around nervously. "Keep your voice down. This isn't exactly public yet." "Come on," April said. "We're your friends. You can tell us." I almost choked on my beer. April Morrison was definitely not Sienna's friend. I'd met her at several company events, and she'd always been polite but distant. If she was fishing for information, it wasn't out of friendship. "It's complicated." Sienna said, He's married too." "Ooh, scandalous," Lexi giggled. Anyone we know? Sienna looked around again, then leaned closer to her companions. It's Chad. April's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Chad Forrester? Our Chad? Your boss, Chad? It just happened, Sienna said defensively. We were working late on the Morrison Industries campaign, and one thing led to another. Sienna, April said carefully, you know about the company's fraternization policy, right? That only applies if there's a complaint or if it affects work performance, and it's not like either of us is going to complain. April and Lexi exchanged glances. I could see April's mind working, probably calculating the implications for the company if this became public knowledge. What about Eli? Lexi asked. And Chad's wife? Sienna waved dismissively. Eli doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy with his little computer business to pay attention to what I'm doing. And Patricia, well, she and Chad have been having problems for years. I'm just helping him realize what he really wants, which is a fresh start. With someone who understands his ambitions and can help him achieve them, I had to admire Sienna's ability to reframe adultery as career counseling. She'd always been good at spinning stories to make herself look better. So, you're going to leave Eli? April pressed. Eventually. I'm just waiting for the right time. There are some financial considerations to work out first. Financial considerations? Sienna's smile turned calculating. Eli's worth more than people realize. That house of his is worth almost $500,000, and his business brings in serious money. Plus, there's some kind of family trust fund he's never wanted to talk about. And you think you can get a share of all that? I've been married to him for 8 years. I've supported his career, entertained his clients, maintained his household. Any decent lawyer could argue that I'm entitled to at least half of everything. April was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Sienna, I really think you should be careful. This kind of situation can get complicated fast, especially when there are workplace implications. What workplace implications? Chad and I are both adults. What we do on our own time is our business. Not when one of you is the other's direct supervisor. Not when decisions about promotions and raises could be influenced by personal relationships. The company could be liable for all kinds of issues. Sienna's expression hardened. Are you threatening me, April? I'm trying to be your friend. I'm trying to warn you that this could blow up in ways you haven't considered. My personal life is not HR's concern unless someone makes it their concern, and I trust that my friends wouldn't do anything to jeopardize my career or my happiness. The threat was subtle but clear. April went quiet, and Lexi quickly changed the subject to safer topics, but I could see that I'd learned everything I needed to know. April Morrison was uncomfortable with the situation and worried about the company's liability. She was also clearly not as loyal to Sienna as Sienna believed. That made her a potential ally. Lexi, on the other hand, was completely under Sienna's influence and would probably support her no matter what. But she was also a gossip who couldn't keep a secret to save her life. That made her useful in a different way. And Sienna was overconfident, dismissive of the risks, and convinced that she could control the narrative. She was also apparently planning to claim half of my assets, including the family trust that she had no legal right to touch. That was going to be a problem for her. I finished my beer and left before they did, but not before making sure April saw me. I wanted her to know that I'd been there, that I might have overheard their conversation. I wanted her to spend the weekend worrying about what I knew and what I might do with that knowledge. Monday morning, I made my second move. I called Coastal Marketing Solutions and asked to speak with April Morrison. This is April. Hi, April. This is Eli Barnes, Sienna's husband. We've met at a few company events. Oh, hi, Eli. What can I do for you? I was wondering if I could take you to lunch today. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. There was a long pause. What kind of something? The kind that affects both of our interests and the company's interests. Another pause. Where did you have in mind? Somewhere private. Somewhere we can talk freely. We met at a small cafe in the next town over, the same place where I'd had dinner with Tommy. April looked nervous, constantly glancing around as if she expected Sienna to materialize at any moment. "Relax," I said after we'd ordered. "Sienna thinks you're at a client lunch. She has no idea we're meeting." "How do you know what Sienna thinks?" "Because I know a lot more about what's going on than she realizes." April studied my face. "How much do you know?" "I know about Chad. I know about the affair. I know about their plans." I leaned forward. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What do you mean, April?" "You work in HR. You know the legal implications of what's happening. A supervisor having an affair with a subordinate, making decisions about her career while they're personally involved. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." April nodded slowly. "I've been worried about exactly that." "So have I, but not for the same reasons." "What do you mean?" I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "These are printouts of emails between Sienna and Chad discussing their relationship and their plans for the future, including their plans to manipulate the divorce proceedings to maximize Sienna's financial settlement." April opened the folder and started reading. Her face went pale. "Where did you get these?" "From my wife's laptop, which she left in my house, connected to my network, accessible with passwords she gave me years ago. Completely legal." "Eli, this is evidence of adultery." "Yes, but it's also evidence of something else. Look at the dates on those emails, then cross-reference them with Sienna's performance reviews and salary increases over the past year." April flipped through the pages, her expression growing more troubled. She got 2 raises and a promotion during the time period covered by these emails. Raises and a promotion that were approved by the man she was sleeping with. How do you think that's going to look to your company's board of directors, or to your other employees who didn't get raises, or to a jury if someone decides to file a discrimination lawsuit? April closed the folder. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to do your job. I want you to protect your company from liability, and I want you to make sure that Sienna faces appropriate consequences for her actions." "You want me to fire her?" "I want you to investigate the situation and take whatever action company policy requires. What that action is up to you and your legal department." April was quiet for a long time, staring at the folder. "Can I keep these?" "Those are copies. I have the originals." "And if I don't do anything?" I smiled. "Then I'll find other ways to handle the situation. Ways that might be more public and more embarrassing for everyone involved." "That sounds like a threat." "It's not a threat, April. It's a promise. My wife is planning to destroy my life and steal everything I've worked for. I'm not going to let that happen quietly." April picked up the folder. "I need to think about this." "Of course. But don't think too long. Every day this continues, your company's liability grows." That afternoon I received a call from Tommy. "It's done." He said, "Mrs. Glay has been very busy with her phone calls, and by tonight half the town will know that Sienna Barnes has been seen around town with Chad Forrester acting inappropriately for a married woman. By tomorrow, the other half will know." "Perfect. What about Patricia Forrester? Mrs. Grayley's bridge partner is Patricia's neighbor, so make sure Patricia hears something that makes her start paying attention to her husband's activities." "Excellent. Phase 2 is in motion." "What's Phase 3? I looked out my office window at the harbor, where the evening light was turning the water gold. "Phase 3 is where we let them destroy themselves." By Wednesday, the gossip network had done its work. I could see the effects everywhere I went in town. Conversations that stopped when I walked by, sympathetic looks from people who'd heard the rumors, and, most tellingly, a sudden increase in business as people found excuses to hire me for computer work so they could get a closer look at how I was handling the situation. Mrs. Patterson from the library called about a virus on her computer that turned out to be a simple software update. Mike from the hardware store needed help with his inventory system that was working perfectly fine. Even Father McKenna from St. Mary's asked me to look at the church's network, then spent an hour asking how I was holding up and whether I needed someone to talk to. The attention was uncomfortable, but it served my purposes. I wanted everyone in town to see me as the wronged husband, the decent man who was being betrayed by his ambitious wife. Their sympathy would make what came next more devastating for Sienna. Meanwhile, Sienna herself seemed oblivious to the shift in public opinion. She came home each evening in a good mood, chatting about her day and making plans for the weekend. If she noticed that people were treating her differently, she didn't mention it. Thursday morning, she got her first real indication that things were changing. I was in my office when her phone rang. She answered with her usual professional cheerfulness, but I could hear the conversation through the thin walls of our old house. "Hello, this is Sienna." "Oh, hi, Patricia, how are you?" "What?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, Chad and I work together, but Patricia, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." The conversation went on for 10 minutes, with Sienna's voice getting higher and more defensive. When it ended, I heard her slam the phone down and curse creatively. She appeared in my office doorway a moment later, her face flushed with anger. "Someone's been spreading rumors about me and Chad," she announced. I looked up from my computer with what I hoped was appropriate concern. "What kind of rumors?" "Stupid gossip about us having an affair. Patricia Forrester just called and accused me of trying to steal her husband. That's terrible. What did you tell her?" "The truth. That Chad and I are colleagues and friends, nothing more." But she didn't believe me. Well, you know how people talk in small towns. "Someone probably saw you having a business dinner and jumped to conclusions." Sienna studied my face. "You don't believe the rumors, do you?" "Of course not. I know you better than that." She relaxed slightly. "Good, because this could really damage my reputation if it gets out of hand." "I'm sure it will blow over. These things always do. But I knew it wouldn't blow over. In fact, it was about to get much worse. Friday afternoon, April Morrison called me. "We need to meet," she said without preamble. "What's the decision?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the same place as before?" An hour later, I sat across from April in the same cafe, watching her fidget with her coffee cup. "I talked to our legal department," she said finally. "They're very concerned about the company's exposure, as they should be. They want to conduct a formal investigation, but they need more evidence than just the emails. They need witnesses, documentation of inappropriate workplace behavior, proof that the relationship affected business decisions." "What kind of proof?" April pulled out a folder of her own. "I've been going through Sienna's personnel file and Chad's approval records. The timeline is damning, but we need someone to go on record about seeing inappropriate behavior in the office." "And do you have someone?" "Maybe. There's a night security guard who's mentioned seeing Chad and Sienna in the office together after hours, in situations that seemed personal." "Will he talk for the right motivation?" "He's not fond of Chad anyway." Apparently, Chad's been dismissive and rude to the support staff. I wasn't surprised. Chad Forrester struck me as the type who only showed respect to people who could help his career. "What do you need from me?" "More evidence. Anything that shows the relationship extended beyond the workplace. Photos, witnesses, documentation of them being together outside of work." I smiled. "I can provide that." "How?" "Let me worry about the how. Just focus on building your case from the inside." "Eli, I need to ask you something. Why are you doing this? I mean, I understand you're angry about the affair, but this seems like more than just hurt feelings." I considered how much to tell her. "April, my wife isn't just cheating on me. She's planning to destroy my life for financial gain. She's been systematically isolating me from my friends, manipulating our finances, and preparing to take everything I've worked for in a divorce settlement based on lies and deception." "How do you know that?" I told her about the emails I'd found, the conversations I'd overheard, the months of subtle manipulation and gaslighting. By the time I finished, April looked sick. "I had no idea it was that calculated," she said. "Most people don't. Sienna's very good at presenting herself as the victim or the innocent party. But the truth is, she's a predator who sees other people as resources to be exploited. And Chad's an arrogant fool who thinks his money and position make him untouchable. He's about to learn otherwise." April was quiet for a moment. "What happens after we expose them?" "Chad loses his job and probably his marriage. Sienna loses her job, her reputation, and her divorce leverage. They both face the consequences of their choices. And then, I get on with my life, and they get what they deserve." That evening, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. I'd been documenting Chad's visits to my house with the hidden cameras, and I had hours of footage showing him arriving and leaving at times when he should have been at work or at home with his wife. I also had audio recordings of their conversations, including detailed discussions of their affair and their plans for the future, all legally obtained on my own property with equipment I owned. But the most damaging evidence was something I'd discovered by accident. While reviewing the footage, I'd noticed that Chad often parked his distinctive black Mercedes in my driveway during the day, clearly visible from the street. Mrs. Glee wasn't the only neighbor who'd noticed. I spent Friday night editing the footage into a comprehensive timeline, showing Chad's car in my driveway during work hours, cross-referenced with his official schedule at the marketing firm. The pattern was unmistakable. He was using company time to conduct his affair. Saturday morning, I drove to Chad's lake house, not to confront him, but to document his lifestyle for Patricia Forrers's benefit. The house was impressive. A modern glass and steel structure that probably cost more than most people made in 5 years. Chad's boat was moored at the private dock, a sleek speedboat that looked like it belonged in a Miami Vice episode. I took photos from the public road, being careful not to trespass. I also noted the security cameras and the lack of close neighbors. It was the perfect place for clandestine meetings, which explained why Chad felt comfortable bringing Sienna there. As I was leaving, I saw Chad's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. Sienna was in the passenger seat, laughing at something he'd said. They looked happy and carefree, completely unaware that their world was about to implode. I felt a moment of something that might have been regret. Once I'd loved Sienna enough to marry her, to trust her with my heart and my future. Seeing her with Chad, I could almost remember what that felt like. But then I thought about the emails, the calculated cruelty of her plans, the way she'd dismissed me as harmless and stupid. The regret faded, replaced by cold determination. They'd made their choices. Now they would live with the consequences. Sunday evening, I made copies of everything: the emails, the photos, the video footage, the financial records. One set went to April Morrison for the company investigation. Another set went to a lawyer I'd consulted about the divorce proceedings. A third set went into a safety deposit box at the bank. And the fourth set, that one was going to Patricia Forrester. Monday morning, I called Patricia and asked if I could speak with her privately. About what? She asked about your husband and my wife and some things I think you need to know. There was a long silence. Then, when and where? We met at her lawyer's office at her request. Patricia Forrester was an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Her attorney, James Whitmore, was one of the most respected lawyers in the county. "Mrs. Forrester," I began, "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your husband is having an affair with my wife." "I suspected as much," she said calmly. "Do you have proof?" I opened my briefcase and laid out the evidence methodically: the emails, the photos, the timeline of Chad's visits to my house. Patricia and her lawyer reviewed everything carefully, asking occasional questions, but mostly listening in silence. When I finished, Patricia sat back in her chair. "How long have you known? For certain?" "About 2 weeks, but I suspect it's been going on for months." "Why are you telling me this?" Because they're planning to leave their spouses and start a new life together, and I thought you deserved to know before they blindsided you with divorce papers. Patricia smiled grimly. Chad won't be blindsiding anyone. Mr. Whitmore, what are our options? The lawyer consulted his notes. Given this evidence, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery. Maine law allows for fault-based divorce in cases of infidelity, which could affect the property settlement significantly. How significantly? Chad could forfeit his claim to alimony and face a reduced share of marital assets, particularly if we can show that he used marital resources to conduct the affair. I pulled out another folder. You might find this interesting. Chad's been using company time and resources to conduct his relationship with my wife. His car's GPS records show multiple trips to my house during work hours, and I have footage of him there when he should have been in the office. Patricia's smile turned predatory. Excellent. What else? He's also been using his position as Sienna's supervisor to give her raises and promotions. That's going to create serious legal problems for the company. And for him personally, he'll lose his job, probably face a lawsuit from other employees who were passed over for promotions. And once word gets out, his reputation in the business community will be destroyed. Patricia looked at her lawyer. I want to file immediately, and I want to make sure Chad understands the full scope of his mistakes. What about your wife? Whitmore asked me. I'll be filing as well. She signed a prenup that forfeits her rights to marital property in case of adultery. She's going to discover that her careful planning was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of her legal position. Patricia extended her hand. Mr. Barnes, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I know this can't have been easy. It wasn't, but it was necessary. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of completion. The trap was set. The evidence was in the right hands, and the people who could act on it were motivated to do so quickly. All that remained was to watch it spring shut. Tuesday morning started like any other day. Sienna left for work at her usual time, kissing my cheek and reminding me that she had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until after 8. I nodded and smiled and told her to have a good day, knowing it would be anything but. At 9 a.m., April Morrison would be presenting her investigation findings to the board of directors at Coastal Marketing Solutions. At 10 a.m., Patricia Foraz's lawyer would be serving Chad with divorce papers at his office. At 11 a.m., the company's board would be meeting with both Chad and Sienna to discuss their immediate termination. I spent the morning in my office trying to work, but mostly watching the clock. Tommy called around noon. You hear anything yet? Nothing, but I wouldn't expect to. Sienna won't call me until she's figured out how to spin this to her advantage. Think she can? Not this time. There's too much evidence and too many people involved. She can't gaslight her way out of this one. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. Sienna's name appeared on the screen. Hi, honey, I answered, injecting just the right amount of casual warmth into my voice. Eli. Her voice was tight, strained. I need you to come pick me up. Pick you up? What's wrong with your car? It's complicated. Can you just come get me? I'm at the office. Of course. Are you okay? You sound upset. I'll explain when you get here. Please hurry. I drove to Coastal Marketing Solutions at a leisurely pace, taking time to appreciate the beautiful fall afternoon. The leaves were turning, painting the coastal landscape in brilliant reds and golds. It seemed appropriate somehow. The end of one season, the beginning of another. Sienna was waiting outside the building, a cardboard box in her arms and tears streaming down her face. She looked smaller, somehow, diminished. The confident, manipulative woman who'd left that morning was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and frightened. She got into the car without speaking, clutching the box like it was a life preserver. What happened? I asked gently. They fired me. The words came out in a whisper. Fired you? Why? They said I was having an inappropriate relationship with Chad. that it violated company policy and created liability issues. That's ridiculous. You and Chad are just colleagues. Sienna turned to look at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Suspicion, maybe, or the first glimmer of understanding. They had evidence, Eli. Emails, photos, witness statements. Someone's been watching us. Evidence of what? Of things that could be misinterpreted. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. Sienna, is there something you need to tell me? She stared at our house. My house? I corrected myself, and I watched her face cycle through emotions. Fear, anger, calculation, desperation. Chad and I, we've grown close. Working together so much, spending time on projects. Maybe it looked like more than it was. How close? I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me the truth. For once, the words hung between us like a challenge. Sienna sat down the box and turned to face me fully. What do you know? I know about the affair. I know about your plans to divorce me and take half of everything I own. I know about the emails, the meetings at Chad's lake house, the times he's been in our bedroom while I was at work. Sienna's face went white. How does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do now, Eli? I can explain. No, you can't. There's no explanation that makes this okay. There's no story you can tell that justifies what you've done. Sienna started crying again, but these tears looked different. Calculated. Strategic. I made a mistake. I know that. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling, rebuild our trust. With what money? You don't have a job anymore, and neither does Chad. What do you mean? Patricia Forrester filed for divorce this morning. Chad was served at the office right before he was terminated. Apparently, using company time and resources to conduct an extramarital affair is grounds for immediate dismissal. Sienna's tears stopped. You did this. I didn't do anything. You and Chad did this to yourselves. You orchestrated it. You planned this whole thing. I smiled. I documented what you were already doing. I made sure the right people had the information they needed to make informed decisions, but the choices were all yours. Sienna's expression hardened. You bastard. You vindictive, petty bastard. There's the real Sienna. I was wondering when she'd show up. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won? I think I've protected myself from someone who was planning to destroy my life for money. Fine. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. I'll take you for everything you're worth in the divorce. I pulled out a folded document and handed it to her. You might want to read this first. Sienna unfolded the paper and scanned it quickly. Her face went from angry to confused to horrified. The prenup, she whispered. The prenup you insisted on. The one that seemed so romantic at the time. The one that forfeits all your claims to marital property in the event of adultery. This can't be enforceable. It is. I had it reviewed by 3 different lawyers. You signed it. It was properly witnessed. And you had independent legal counsel at the time. It's ironclad. Sienna crumpled the paper in her fists. So what? I get nothing. You get your personal belongings, your clothes, your jewelry. Everything else stays with me. The House Family Trust. You never had any claim to it. Your business. I built it before we were married, and you had no involvement in it. It's mine. This is insane. 8 years of marriage, and I walk away with nothing. You walk away with exactly what you brought to the marriage, which, as I recall, was a 10-year-old Honda and about $3,000 in credit card debt. Sienna stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Who are you? This isn't the man I married. You're right. The man you married was naive enough to trust you, foolish enough to believe you loved him, weak enough to let you manipulate and control him. I met her eyes. That man is gone. So what happens now? Now you pack your things and find somewhere else to live. I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow morning. And if I refuse to sign, then we'll go to court, and all of this becomes public record. Every email, every photo, every detail of your affair will be entered as evidence. Is that really what you want? Sienna sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the house she'd thought would make her rich. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Eli, please, I know I made mistakes. But no, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Calculated, deliberate choices to betray our marriage and plan my destruction. Now you get to live with the consequences. I got out of the car and walked toward the house. Behind me, I heard Sienna call my name, her voice breaking with desperation. But I didn't turn around. That evening, I sat on my front porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the harbor gold and red. Mrs. Glay appeared at her garden gate, clearly bursting with curiosity. Evening, Eli. Heard there was some excitement at the marketing firm today. So I heard. Sienna seemed pretty upset when you brought her home. I imagine she was. She left again about an hour ago with a suitcase. Did she? Mrs. Glay smiled. Your grandfather would be proud, you know, standing up for yourself like that. I hope so. What happens next? I took a long drink of beer and watched a fishing boat make its way back to harbor, guided by the lighthouse beam. Next, I get my life back. Thursday morning, I filed for divorce. By Friday, the story had made its way through the entire town. Chad Forrester, the golden boy of Millbrook's business community, had been caught in an affair with his employee and lost everything. His wife was taking him for half his assets, his company had fired him, and his reputation was in ruins. Sienna had moved into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, her fall from grace complete. The woman who'd once been the envy of every wife in Millbrook was now the subject of whispered gossip and pointed fingers. Tommy stopped by that evening with a bottle of good whiskey. Heard Chad's been trying to get a job at firms in Portland, he said as we sat on the porch. No luck so far. Word travels fast in business circles. What about Sienna? Haven't seen her around town. Heard she's been making calls, trying to find work, but with no references from her last job. He shrugged. I felt a momentary pang of something that might have been guilt. Then I remembered the emails, the casual cruelty of her plans, the way she'd dismissed me as harmless and stupid. They made their choices. I said that they did. Tommy raised his glass to getting what you deserve. To getting what you deserve. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Sienna had signed the papers without contest, probably because she'd realized that fighting would only make things worse. She'd left town shortly after, and I'd heard she was working at a small marketing firm in Boston, making a fraction of what she'd earned at Coastal Marketing. Chad had eventually found work at a company in New Hampshire, but his career never recovered. Patricia had taken him for everything she could in the divorce, and his professional reputation was permanently damaged. I kept the house, the business, and my self-respect. More importantly, I'd learned something valuable about the difference between being harmless and being weak. I wasn't harmless anymore, and I was never going to be weak again. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the harbor in brilliant colors, I reflected on the events of the past year. Some people might call what I'd done cruel or vindictive. They might say I should have been the bigger person, should have forgiven and moved on. But those people had never been betrayed the way I'd been betrayed. They'd never discovered that the person they loved most was planning their destruction for profit. They'd never heard themselves dismissed as harmless and stupid by someone they'd trusted with their heart. Sienna and Chad had gotten exactly what they deserved, and I'd gotten exactly what I'd worked for. Justice served cold, with a side of poetic irony.